Good morning, everybody. We are on our way to the convent. One of the great gifts and privileges that we have as CFR brothers is that most every morning at our friary, one of the brothers from our friary gets to go out to different convents. And so this morning we're on our way to Our Lady Queen of Angels Convent, which is the convent of our sisters, the Franciscan Sisters of the Renewal. So we get the joy of going and being with them and just having a great opportunity to be with our sisters. Because let's be honest, our sisters are really faithful and they are great examples to us, even in living the Franciscan way of life. So yeah, it's exciting to go and be with them. It's early. People are just getting up as well and getting to work, but it's great to go to be with the sisters. Here we are at the convent, gonna ring the doorbell. One of the sisters will come out and get us. Hi, sister. How are you?
How are you doing?
It's cold. Look at that. Come on. In the book of Revelation, John talks about the face of Jesus, and he says the face of Jesus shone with the full force of the sun. When we read that a couple days ago in our office, I went back and reread that. It's at the end of the first chapter of the book of Revelation, and he talks about how the face of Jesus shone with the full force of the sun. That's pretty intense and pretty significant to imagine. As the sun rises today, it's kind of a prayer forms in our hearts that the Lord might shine on us today with the full force of what the sun gives off. Pretty beautiful. So sister, you took final vows in
2012.
In 2012, for final vows, you get a ring, correct?
Yes.
There seems to be a story lately that surrounds your particular ring.
Yeah, so this ring I have not taken off since 2012. I am very grateful to be married to Jesus, the King of the universe. And a couple weeks ago, I found my hand bare, much to my surprise. And I went retracing my steps of what had happened that day. And I had washed dishes in 2 different sinks. And I was like, it's in the sewer. And we started praying to St. Anthony. St. Anthony, please, I need this ring back. Almost a week has passed. And again, at the breakfast table, Mother Claire said, your ring? And I said, no, I still don't have it. And she said, this morning, I wrote into my journal, and I never do this, St. Anthony, we're going to offer 9 masses for the needs of the poor. We need Sister Maria Teresa's ring back. And so at midday prayer, one of the sisters comes to find me, and she had been at the door with one of our friends who comes just about every day. And this woman in particular had been at the door the day that I lost my ring. And I had been helping her put some clothes and shoes into the suitcase that she had been wheeling around with all of her possessions in it. And I had told the sisters, it could be in her bag, but then forget about it, like it's gone. And the Sister Josephine comes up the stairs with this pink slip, and she said, sister, your ring. And she had asked her, did you happen to find a ring in your bag the other day? And amazingly, she said, yes. And she said, well, do you still have that? And she said, no, sister, I'm sorry. She said, well, is there any way we could get it back? And she said, probably not till the spring. And she produces this pink slip, and the sister doesn't know, what is this? What does this mean? And she comes to bring this slip to me, and Mother Claire and I are standing there looking at it. It's the receipt for a pawn shop. My ring had been pawned down the street. So Mother Claire and I about jump up and down. It's in the pawn shop. So we run down the stairs. We got to go get it now before they sell it to somebody else. And we see the woman at the door, and she's like, "Are you going to press charges?" We're like, "No," and we're hugging her, like, "Thank you." And we run down to the pawn shop, and there it is lo and behold, I present the ticket, and I say to the man, who looks quite surprised to see two sisters walk into the pawn shop. And I said, "Do you have this still?" And I hand him the receipt, and he goes, "I think so. You want to see it?" And Mother Claire goes, "We want to buy it." And he brings it out, and there it is. There's my ring. So I had to buy back my final vows ring at a pawn shop last week. But
it's all good.
Yeah, it's okay. It didn't change the internal reality that I was still married to Jesus inside, but I'm really glad to have the symbol, the external sign back on my hand. Hi, I'm Sister Maria Teresa here at Our Lady Queen of Angels Convent in East Harlem. I grew up in a Catholic family. I have wonderful, loving parents and a younger sister, but our faith was not really central to our life. We went to church every Sunday, but I wasn't very well catechized, and actually, if I were to really say that I had a God, it was tennis, unfortunately. I was training to become a professional tennis player, believe it or not, in high school, and I lived at a tennis academy for a couple of years of high school, and really everything for me was eat, sleep, breathe, play tennis. Went to Boston College on a tennis scholarship, and I was studying political science, minding my own business. And if you were to look at my life then, everything on paper really looked perfect. I was getting good grades, I was going to school for free, and I had hoped to go to law school after college. I had a plan, I had a plan and everything was going well. I had a boyfriend, I had lots of wonderful friends. Everything was going great, but. Yeah, but. If I was really honest with myself, when I went to bed at night, there was a tremendous emptiness deep inside of me. I was missing something, not just something, but someone. And there was a great void in my life. And I just kept searching for this can't be it. There must be something more to life. And of course, I did a lot of the things that kids do in college, looking for happiness, seeking things that ultimately don't fulfill. And that emptiness just continued to grow. But the Lord broke in. So I went on a mission trip. I was a sophomore in college, 19 years old, went down to Honduras and just thought I'll serve some poor children over Christmas break. Somehow our tennis coach let us go on this mission trip, a couple of us. And while I was there, I found myself in the chapel of the friary in a holy hour. We had volunteered with the friars for the day. I was at a totally different mission. And it was during Holy Hour, I was kneeling there, and I realized I didn't believe in the real presence, even though I was Catholic. And so I knelt down there and I looked around, and there's all these people kneeling, and I was like, this is weird. Like, what are we doing here? And then I said probably what was the most honest prayer that I had ever said, and I just said, Jesus, I believe you're God, but I don't know if I really believe that you're here. It looks like bread to me. And but because you're God, if you are here, you can make me believe it. And I opened my heart just a little crack. And with the Lord, it's quite an opportunity for him. And in that moment, I experienced the love that fills the void, and everything changed for me after that. He just came in a powerful way, and I think I realized that everything that I had been looking for was right here, and he was really there, and I never doubted Jesus' presence in the Blessed Sacrament ever again. It was such a profound experience of his love for me, and it was so immediate, and it wasn't anything mystical it's what God does when he wants to tell us that he loves us if we give him a second and listen. So after I had that experience in the chapel, I walked out and I was just like, what just happened? I mean, I cried and I'm not really a ready crier, so it was a little bit awkward for me. Why am I crying? But you know, God's love, it just breaks down everything. And I think I was experiencing just being loved to the full. And it was very personal. So I walk out of the chapel and I run into a couple of the friars, and I think they can see that I sort of had an experience of God there, and I was your typical fairly pagan college student at that time. So we're standing around talking, and I have no doubt now, looking back, that they were trying to evangelize me, and they just happened to start talking about confession. I don't know why that came up. But it was interesting because one of the friars said, he was talking about the importance of confession, just sort of casually, and I looked at him with all of the hubris of a college student who, you know, sort of waxes philosophical, you know, and oh, nobody does that anymore. And he looked at me so sincerely and so kindly and just said, well, I do every week. And I was like, and he had given the homily that day, and I was pretty sure he was the most brilliant person I had ever met. And I was like, wow, okay, so apparently there's something to this. But I kept thinking about that because they were talking about the mercy of God, and I realized that I was sort of like the woman in the gospel who was totally bent over. That's how I imagine my life before Jesus. It's sort of like carrying around this backpack full of boulders, and it's heavy, but God doesn't want that. But I didn't realize that until that moment. So did I go to confession to that priest? No, I did not have that courage. But I went back to Boston College, and I found some unsuspecting Jesuit who was very elderly, sitting in the confessional before daily mass, 15 minutes before daily mass, and I sprung myself on him. And I just went into the confessional and said, Father, it's been, so many years since I've been to confession. I don't even know how to go to confession. I just know I need to. I don't want to carry this around with me anymore. And he was so kind. And he smiled and he received me so warmly. And I didn't realize at the time what he was doing, but he walked me through a general confession. And I thank God so much for his wisdom in just doing that for me, because he could have just said, okay, like, what can you think of? But he knew, like, it had been a while and I really needed the help. And so he just said, okay, well, let's just talk. And he asked me questions about my life and I answered them. And I can't describe to you how that changed my life. I went to confession because I thought that's what I was supposed to do to start practicing my faith, and I realized there was sort of a block there. But what really happened after he said those words of absolution was he gave me my life back. I became alive for the first time. It was like I had been living in black and white and everything turned to color. Everything was bright and the flowers bloomed and everything looked different. And it was because Jesus forgave me. And so then I really realized that life was worth living for a different reason, and I had been missing the fullness of what life could be, but now I had found the truth. And it changed everything for me. I had been living such a worldly life, seeking after material things, and they just never satisfied. But when I experienced the love and the mercy of Jesus, everything came to life again, and I was finally free to just become who he made me to be.
When did the question come up for you when it comes to discerning your vocation and thinking about being a sister?
I was still playing tennis in college, and I finished playing I had a scholarship that was paying for college, and thank God. But the meaning of it really changed for me. I learned to pray the rosary on the Stairmaster because we would have to, our coach would be standing over us going, faster, faster, faster. I'd be like dying. And I'd be clutching the Stairmaster, Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is. And I learned to pray the rosary on the Stairmaster, counting with my fingers. So my faith became integrated into the rest of my life. But little by little, those things, the tennis, the considering law school, the importance of it began to fade, and I started to get into doing youth ministry a little bit. And I found that talking about Jesus just made me feel so alive. And I started to think about, how could I do this all the time? Is it possible to live this way? And I was dating at the time, and I have a distinct memory of being on a date at Anna's Taqueria, a very glamorous dating location in college, and we were talking, and I suddenly started to daydream about how I could make a holy hour. All of a sudden I was like, oh my gosh, there's something wrong with me. What is wrong with me? And I really started to get worried, because I started to lose the desire to date. It wasn't that I didn't want to date, it was that I felt like I couldn't give my heart away to the young man that I was dating, and it was so confusing to me. I had only ever imagined, my wedding and my big family and my nice house and my fancy car. And I went to this priest that I had met on campus, and I was like, Father, I need to talk to you. And he's like, sure. And I said, I think I have a problem. I'm dating this guy, and I don't want to date anymore, and there's something wrong with me, as you do, totally freak out. And he said to me, well, okay, well, maybe not. Let's just talk about why, And I just started to describe to him, I feel like I'm cheating on Jesus. I'm in love with God, and I just want to spend my whole life for him. And how can I give my heart to this young man if I feel like that? I know marriage is beautiful and holy and good, and it's not that I don't desire that, but I just want to give my life to Jesus. And he was like, okay, well, have you ever thought about religious life? And I was like, religious what? I had never met a sister. This was not on my radar screen at all. And then he just began to explain to me that in the scripture, St. Paul talks about how sometimes God makes certain people with a heart that's meant to be undivided for him. And that's the way that your love is meant to be given. That is the way that you give the gift of yourself. And it resonated with me on a certain level, but at the same time, I was just totally afraid. What is this going to look like? You grow up, your next door neighbor is a doctor or a lawyer. They're not none. What is this supposed to look like? I remember distinctly a point about 6 months later, and I was just praying about it with lots of fear. I was at Mass, just an average daily Mass, and I remember during the consecration, looking up at the Eucharist and just knowing in my heart that he was inviting me to belong totally to him. And for the first time, I experienced this profound joy. And it was like everything inside of me just said, yes, this is what I want. And I was excited, and I had no idea what it was going to look like. And I ran out of the chapel I knew my spiritual director was in the confessional, and I ran up there, and thankfully no one was in there. And I was like, Father! And he was like, yeah? And I was like, I know. And he was like, oh, thank God, because he had known. But he was so good and patient and waiting for me to discover in prayer what God wanted. And from then on, I was sure, but I just didn't know how. And so I finished college. That was my junior year of college, going into my senior year, and I finished college and I moved to Honduras, and I lived there for a year as a missionary in a lay community. And I was working near the friars, and I kept seeing their life. And I was talking with one of the friars a bit, and he was sort of like a spiritual director to me. And he just said to me one day, everything that you're describing to me sounds like our sisters. And I was like, you have sisters? Where? And what do they do? And what is it like? And he's like, in New York. So another miracle happened, because I called the sisters, and at the time, Sister Claire was the vocation director, and she answered the phone. In our life, the phone, it's not too common. So she answered the phone, and I was in an internet cafe in Honduras, and I just started pouring out this, and I think I might be called to religious life, and I don't know. And, I was just so nervous to talk to a sister. What is she going to be like? You imagine it's like an alien or something. Like, what do they do in there? And she was so normal and kind. And we just had a conversation about my life, what had been going on in my prayer, and then she said, why don't you come and see, come to visit and see what it's like, and we'll just keep talking. And it turned out, this was like November, and they were having a come and see, a discernment weekend for about 4 days. And I said a prayer like, Lord, I will mess this up. Please just show me what you want. And he did. I was here over the Feast of Our Lady of Guadalupe, and within about the first 3 hours, I think, I just knew. I was like, I want to do this for the rest of my life. Yeah, I experienced so much peace and joy, and I felt so at home with the sisters. I felt like, well, they're just like me. A little bit crazy, but they were so joyful, and they just loved Jesus with their whole heart. And I saw them living that out with the poor, and I had felt this experience of knowing that God was asking me to live with him with the poor. And I couldn't believe that that's what they did. It was like evangelization and hands-on work with the poor. It's like God made this community for me. And he did. God is so personal that he somehow, in his great plan, had this in mind. And I am so grateful for my vocation. I thank God every morning when I get up. I cannot believe I get to live this way. I get to get up in the morning to pray and to be with him. And not that there aren't hard days. I mean, I get up on the wrong side of the bed just like everybody else. It's not all roses, of course, but it's all worth it. We are right with the people that we serve. The first floor of our convent is a soup kitchen, and we have a clothing pantry and a food pantry. And we usually have somewhere between 30 and 40 homeless people that come to the door every day for sandwiches and coffee and clothes and a conversation, because that's what we need, God's love. No matter what your vocation is, if you give your heart to Jesus, he is going to fulfill it. And then there's nothing to be afraid, because that's ultimately what we desire, is to be fulfilled. And he wants that even more than we do. And sometimes we think we're going to find it in other places, but ultimately it's only found in him. And Jesus is enough.
All right, done with the sisters. It was good to be with them. The good thing about the sisters, it's a feast day. They always ask if you want breakfast. We have cookies, coffee, but it's always a gift to be with the sisters and to pray with them. And as you got to see, Sister Mary Teresa as a beautiful witness, and she's a beautiful icon of what God does in the heart of a young woman who desires to give her everything to Jesus. Now we're back to the friary. We have 2.5 hours till we open for the soup kitchen. So the rest of the brothers are back there getting ready for the soup kitchen, making food, making food prep. We'll serve about 70 to 80 people at St. Joseph's table today, which is always one of the highlights of the week. So. Dance on camera? Gonna dance for the camera. You all right, my man?
Let's look at God's ideal for you and me. Look at your state in life and then look at this book, this awesome book. And find out what part of Jesus' life are you called to follow. It's in here. It's in here. Brothers, imitate the working Jesus, the servant of servants, the Jesus who knelt at his apostles' feet and washed them. The Jesus who said to Peter, when Peter said, "Oh, wait a minute, you're not going to wash my feet." He washed all the others, though, and Peter was saying, "What's the matter with that guy? He's nuts letting others wash his feet. What a humiliating thing. Why don't they do something about it?" Now he comes to Peter. And Peter lets out all his anger. "You're not going to wash my feet. No, wait." What did Jesus do? Pour the water on his head? No. "Oh, Peter," he said, "if I do not wash your feet, you have nothing to do with me anymore." What a threat. Why? Because if Peter did not understand how to be a servant and how to help, he couldn't be a leader. Couldn't. So that's the life of a brother. They imitate the working Jesus. No matter what other vocation you have, your primary vocation is to fill out the desire of God for you by in some way imitating his life.
The season of Advent kind of takes us through this longing and this desire and this what our hearts are really made for, when we have to maybe pull stuff out and we have to let things die maybe, and maybe parts of our heart that need conversion and need something different. Advent is a time where we kind of beg the Lord. That refrain, that constant refrain during Advent, John the Baptist, come Lord Jesus. We have the candles, and the candles are a sign of light, and the Advent wreath, and even in the midst of this kind of dark time or time where we specifically kind of let things kind of die away, it can be a time of light, and that candle's lit to remind us that the light of Christ is bright and can do the work.